This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
What's up, Bo?
How you doing, man?
I'm all right. How you feeling?
Good, bro. Feeling good. We got some rest. That was
good.
Dude, I got back from the Metallica concert on Sunday night, like at 2 a.m. You've done this shit, and then you got a flight at 7 o'clock in the morning. So you've got I'm in Canada, so you got to go through customs. So I got to get up at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like 2 hours, and I slept a little bit on the plane, but when I got here,
really
I was
get that great sleep on the plane.
Yeah, no. And when you got to do talk and you're talking for 3 hours, your brain has to be sharp, dude.
Yep.
You're tired. You will not be able to flow, and so I had to cancel yesterday. I said, we'll push it to today, and we'll get a full show in and get everybody in and talk all kinds of good stuff. Let me test you because Poupart threw me completely off here.
Okay,
so this team made the playoffs, backed into the playoffs with a shit ton of injuries, a third-string quarterback. So in the offseason, now you add Vic Fangio and you add Long and you'll get Ramsey back eventually. And now you're going to get Needham and Trill back and Brandon Jones. You got more depth. You added Long, all of this stuff. So if the Dolphins are relatively healthy, okay, because obviously injuries can derail anyone's season. We all know that. But if the Dolphins are relatively healthy, are they not a playoff team? Because Poupart put me on they're a borderline. They could be in or out. And I'm like, wait a minute. You added Fangio. Just Fangio alone should bring you maybe another victory or two. So I'm just wondering, because now I'm going to hold Poupart's feet to the fire now at the end of the year. Because if they don't make the playoffs, I'm going to say, well, Poupart, you can't really rip into Mike McDaniel because you're not surprised they didn't make the playoffs, correct?
Right.
So he can't argue with me there. I will rip Mike McDaniel if they don't make the playoffs because this is a playoff team. No doubt in my mind. And if you're a good coaching staff, you should put this team into the playoffs. Again, Armstead gets injured and Tua and this and that, and it derails your season. I can see that happening. Okay, fine. But health-wise, what kind of a team is this?
So it would be a big disappointment to me if the Dolphins missed the playoffs. I think that they have the talent to be one of the top 7 teams in the AFC. That's my hardcore fact. Now, I will say this because this context is important. The AFC and the talent in the AFC is the best I've seen since I've covered the league. From top to bottom with the teams, there's just deeper teams. There's probably 11 or 12 teams that are sitting here and say we should be a playoff team. And I'm just like looking at the standings and the rosters. Like, look at it. If you expect there's 4 division winners, right? Let's just kind of run through this and guesstimate. Let's say in the AFC South, let's say it's Jacksonville. Okay. Let's say in the AFC West, let's say it's Kansas City. Let's say in the AFC North, let's say Cincinnati does it again. Okay. And let's say in the AFC East, let's just for the sake of this, let's not say the Dolphins. Let's say for the sakes of this argument, let's say it's the Bills because they've won this division, right?
Okay.
Now in that scenario, you got 4 teams already in. You got 3 spots left. The Bills, the Chiefs, the Jags, and the Bengals have taken them. Now for 3 spots, you've got the Jets, the Dolphins, the Ravens, the Browns and the Steelers, the Chargers, and the Titans. Those are just 7 other teams I mentioned.
Who's the best passer out of those 7?
Out of the ones I mentioned?
Yes.
You could probably make an argument for either Aaron Rodgers, Lamar Jackson, who I know you don't love.
No, he's not a better passer even in his dreams than Tua.
I'm going through the options. Aaron Rodgers, Tua, Lamar, and Justin Herbert. Of those 4 are probably the best passers. Deshaun's been a while since he's been that guy. Peak Deshaun would certainly be in this discussion, but it's been.
Wait a minute. He makes passes on women. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I digress. I'm sorry. Go. I'm sorry.
Yes. So essentially, I think what you mentioned, those 4 quarterbacks, if you want to include Deshaun, is 5. But that's 5 teams that are in our mix who are not division winners who could certainly.
Who's the number 1 rated out of those 7?
Huh?
Who was the number 1 rated passer out of those 7?
Tua. You're talking to a guy but I'm trying to give you a realistic view of why it's not easy. I think it would be a disappointment for the Dolphins.
I never said it was easy. I never said it was easy, but I'm saying this, McDaniel, you better make the freaking playoffs, bro. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
I don't care what the excuses are. I don't care what the Jets did. I don't care what the Browns did. I don't care if the Baltimore Ravens brought back Jerry Rice from 1985. Make the playoffs, bro. Make the playoffs. Yeah. You got the team. I mean, No,
I'm completely with you. There's no excuse. The Dolphins should be a playoff team. They would be taking a step backwards if they weren't. That's the problem when you put your expectations and your production last year, where you were a playoff team when Tua missed 5 games. If Tua stays healthy, why would we take a step backwards? If we go get a new defensive coordinator, we made the highest paid defensive coordinator in football, and our quarterback stays healthy, why would we take a step backwards? So that's why I say even from the talent, like I'm giving you the context that the AFC is a lot better. But even with that, it would be considered a step backwards and a big disappointment if the Dolphins missed the playoffs.
I agree. And let me tell you something. While the, AFC's gotten better, the Dolphins have gotten so much better that this is their best team in like over 30 years.
Right.
So, you better make some damage. You better get to the playoffs because you haven't had a team this good. I'm telling you, as a guy that's been around, you haven't had a team this good since the early 90s. And if this defense shows up like I'm expecting it to, we have to now go back to the 80s because this team will be better than the 90s teams, except for Marino is the only position that you have to go, okay, no, light year, you got to go Marino, and that's fine. If you want to do that, that's great. I got no problem with that. But the rest of the team, I could actually argue that this is a hell of a team, and you better find a way to win. And listen, here's the other thing. I know that we're all worried about the guard and the right tackle. I get that, and that's normal. But by the way, the entire division has a couple spots in each of their offensive line issues too. Jets, Bills, Patriots, they all have concerns on the offensive line, just like the Miami Dolphins do.
Right. The Jets in particular, like I just was in Charlotte and Spartanburg this past week covering Panthers Jets joint practice and then the preseason game. And the Jets offensive line, just like pretty much 25 other teams, including every team in the AFC East, it has some issues. They don't know who is going to be their right tackle. They have 2 journeymen competing for that spot. Neither of them is good enough to play. The guy they'd love to win that job, Mekhi Becton, hasn't been able to survive enough on those knees to stay healthy. And so he's certainly unknown. He's a bigger dude. Yeah.
When you see him up
supposedly, from what I understand, he came in the best shape of his career this year, but he's still over 350. And so that shows you what he was before. And so you're playing right tackle in a scheme that the Jets have a similar scheme to what Mike McDaniel is running here with the Dolphins. And so think about that zone scheme where you're trying to run, you're trying to move, and you got a 350-pound plus right tackle. That's tough, especially one coming off of multiple significant knee injuries that he had surgery.
And Cam, you got to see him up close. I've seen him up close. I don't think you realize how big he is until you see him, and then you say,
"Yep, he's huge. He's 6'8", probably 360. He's just a huge mammoth of a guy." And he doesn't move. He moves like a big power dude. Like Jordan Mailata for the Eagles is another huge dude. He's 6'9". He might be 360, 370, but he moves like a dancing bear, which is why he works in their scheme.
Even the old man in San Francisco can move still.
Absolutely. Trent can still move.
Yep. And he's old, but it's just that Mekhi does not have those. It's not his fault. It's just the way he's built. He just doesn't have that. And I don't think he'll ever hold up because it's just too much weight on those knees. And now I think it's all these years of doing it that by now, and now the injuries that he's had, I just don't think he'll ever get to that. So, but the point is, you saw it up close.
I tweeted this. Offensive line depth is maybe the biggest epidemic in the NFL right now. And so you look at your team and say, why don't I have this? Why are my backups sucking? Why can't I find a left guard if you're the Dolphins? Or why can't I find a right tackle if you're the Jets? Why am I going to have to see Liam Eichenberg or Austin Jackson or whatever your issue is with the Dolphins? Trust me, another team has the same, if not worse, issues. It is an issue throughout the league. There's a lack of talented offensive linemen. It's hard for teams to sport 5 good offensive linemen, nonetheless 9 to fill their roster. And so that doesn't say that you don't bring it up as an issue. It's certainly an issue, but it's everybody's issue. Outside of maybe the Eagles, I'm trying to think. Kansas City's got a good offensive line.
San Francisco and Philadelphia. That's about it.
Bro. That's it. Atlanta, maybe. Atlanta has a good offensive line too. We saw that here. But it's less than 5. I can count on one hand teams that are not worried about their offensive line.
Right. Yeah. No, and I'm sure those guys are worried about depth. Maybe.
Yes. Even those guys, yes. They might feel good about their 5, or maybe even their 6. They're 6. But it's like there's always that one spot like, man, I hope my center doesn't get hurt. Or, man, I hope my left tackle doesn't get hurt. There's always one that you don't feel great about. And so, yeah, I think a guess here saying the Lions. The Lions are probably in that group too, right? Where they have a good starting 5, but it's just so hard. Unlike other spots, like I was watching the Jets, and it was such a contrast to see their defensive front, their defensive line and edge rushers. They're like 3 or 4 deep. They're so deep, so talented. Their backups are Will McDonald, their first-round pick last year, and Jermaine Johnson, their first-round pick. Or the first round pick this year, Will McDonald, and their first round pick last year, Jermaine Johnson, are their 3rd and 4th edge rushers. What teams had backups for their last 2 first round picks? But on the other side of the ball, they're trying undrafted players in the starting lineup on the offensive line. And so it's just a dramatic difference in the talent just throughout the league.
I've explained it, and I talked about it with Poupart, not with Marcel today, but I'll do it with you again here. College has effed up the NFL because scouts now in the NFL, they are guessing what linemen can run block. They know they see the guys pass blocking because that's all they do in college. But they really, when they draft guys, they don't really know if they can run block until they get to the NFL, and then they find out, oh my God, this guy cannot run block if his life depended on it. And it's become so hard for NFL scouts to really determine what a lineman is going to be as a run blocker. It's almost impossible now. And that's hurt.
And so what's interesting also is like the scheme differences in the NFL. Like the NFL is adopting a lot of college scheme, but it's still dramatically different. Like, for example, I was watching the Panthers, and I'll give you a perfect and real example. I was watching the Panthers yesterday, and the Panthers offensive line actually was pretty decent the second half of last year. But what they did was they transitioned to pretty much a power run team where they got under center and they're just saying, hey, go downhill. And they had the talent for it. Their first round pick last year, Ike Ekwonu, happened to be one of those rare offensive linemen who was very good at run blocking. That was what his mantra was. But this year, they're running a spread offense, or they're trying to run a version of a spread offense because Bryce Young, this is what you ran in Alabama. He's really good at quick decision-making, anticipation. Ike Ekwonu really struggled badly in that preseason game against the Jets defensive line. And I think a part of it is he's not used to running that type of shotgun, consistent, the feet movement. You got to deal with a quick rusher on one play, a power rusher on another play, and your feet have to be right. That's just not something these offensive linemen are typically used to. They're used to their specific strengths. And so a lot of times you see teams draft linemen that are from their scheme. It may not be the most talented, but they're like, oh, this guy's a fit for the wide zone scheme. And so you'll hear that, particularly with the wide zone, because it's a difficult thing to learn. And you may have a lineman that he may have a second-round grade on your board. There might be a first-round grade for another lineman, but the other lineman maybe to be a power scheme guy. And your lineman may be a zone scheme guy. And you take the second-round lineman first. He may be less talented, but you feel like the transition is going to be better for him because he does something you've already seen him do. Some teams just say, hey, I'm going to pick the best guy and will try to force him and figure out if he can play another scheme, and you get yourself in trouble sometimes.
Would you where are you at with Austin Jackson? Because there's been some up and down moments, but he played pretty solid in the preseason game. I know the Eichenberg thing looks a lot more, iffy. Where's Austin Jackson? Is he turning a corner? Is he still very questionable for you? Where are you at?
So I think he's improving, but it's all relative, right? Because it's practice. I want to see it in the game action.
Right,
I think
exactly.
Austin Jackson talked a lot about how he feels more comfortable within the scheme. You could tell he's in good shape. I can feel a different confidence about him, but I'm not going to be able to tell until he's lined up across Joey Bosa week 1, and if he gives up 3 sacks, all of that's for naught. I'm not going to tell you how decent or good Austin Jackson looked in training camp if it doesn't matter week 1. And so, forgive me, but I am going to reserve judgment on Austin Jackson and really the line as a whole until I see him in game action. But I will tell you, Austin Jackson has looked better. And so that's the context I can give you. Training camp for him has been better than the last couple training camps I've seen. And even the preseason game, I thought he played pretty solid in the action that he was into. So I want to see him.
The thing I was worried about, I don't know if you noticed this, he should have been called for 2 penalties on moving. Did you notice it too, that he moved before everybody else and they did not call it twice? Yeah. And I'm wondering, is he so amped up that he wants to make sure he gets the play right, that he's trying to time the snap and get in position before the end gets there, that he's, because there should have been 2, motion penalties on him in that game, and they didn't call it. But I will say, overall, his blocking was pretty solid, whereas in training camp, you see moments, and then there are these other moments that are like, oh my God, you're like missed completely. That guy went right by you, and those are the things that are, that's a Jesse Davis type thing that'll get your quarterback killed.
Absolutely. Penalties have been an issue for this Dolphins team for really in the Mike McDaniel era. Like, it's the reality of it. Like, Mike McDaniel has done a lot of good things. Keep his team from committing penalties, particularly pre-snap penalties, has not been one of those strengths. And so he's told them throughout the offseason, we were the worst in the league in penalties last year. We were the worst. He's repeating it. And I will tell you, watching practice, they've still struggled with pre-snap penalties. There's been some rough sessions. Bring back the wall. I was going to say, you can say what you want about Brian Flores, and I'm sure there's a lot you can say, but those boys were not committing penalties. They were, maybe it was out of fear, but they were not committing.
You're running up practice. You don't want to run that shit. So yes, it becomes a motivating factor. Bring back the wall.
So yes. That's something that I'm definitely going to keep an eye on this preseason game, because the reality is this is an offense that, with all its strengths, they cannot afford to go 1st and 15, 1st and 20, 2nd and 20, 2nd and 15 consistently, because of what we've seen in camp is a lot of what we've seen last year. They're very much big play dependent. And I hope that during the regular season, we see a little bit more consistency with the run game, a little bit more consistency with them putting 10 play drives together if they need to. But I watched practice, what was it, yesterday, and literally it was like a broken record. You see 2 plays in a row where the defensive front dominates the offensive line for a would-be sack. And then you see Tua throw a 50-yard pass to Tyreek for a touchdown. And it's just like a back and forth. 2 negative plays, 1 big play to Tyreek. 2 negative plays, 1 big play to Tyreek. And that's the offense. And yes, having Tyreek and Waddle can bail you out of a lot, but the negatives, they compound, and that's how you get yourself in trouble, and penalties.
Yeah, it puts a quarterback at a real disadvantage.
Right. And a lot of times, just the reality, we talk about Tua staying healthy. A lot of times health means that I don't got to hold the ball because it's 3rd and 20 and I'm looking for Tyreek for a 50-yard touchdown. Holding the ball, like if it's 3rd and 3, I might be able to get the ball out a little quicker than if it's 3rd and 20. And so sometimes that might be the difference between keeping your quarterback healthy or not.
So throughout the offseason, people asked about Brandon Shell. And one of the things that I told you throughout the offseason and why he was still out there is that people around the league don't think that his body will hold up because it's got some wear and tear. He's 31 or 32, I think now. And so today, we have news. Bills offensive lineman Brandon Shell was not at practice today. and intends to retire. I'm told Shell signed with the Bills in late May. He was a 5th-round pick, yada, 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 whatever. But Brandon Shell is stepping down. That body has taken a lot of punishment, and people around the league were afraid that he could not hold up throughout an offseason. That's why they even told me that if he signed right around training camp or in the middle of the preseason because somebody's hurting, and then he can hold up at that point. He couldn't even make it through the preseason. He is now retiring. Brandon Shell. How about that?
Right. I actually checked on this myself, and he is done. He's going to retire. It was time for him. You're right. There's a lot of information that teams have that maybe we don't have at that time. And so I remember we were having these conversations. I don't know what was it, April, May, and the most common question was, "Why are we not signing Brandon Shell? Why are we?" And I even remember it's like, "Why would we sign Isaiah Wynn over Brandon Shell? Chris Greer is getting cheap." And now you got Isaiah Wynn competing for a starting spot at left guard, and you got Brandon Shell calling the career. And so maybe, I'm not saying they're always right, but in this particular situation, the Dolphins may have been right on that.
Hey, I told you. They told me that.
Right, Kendall Lamb too. Like they got they went inside Kendall Lamb and Isaiah Wynn and Cedric Obugoye.
And by the way,
he's not going to make the roster, but
you get
two of the three.
Listen, you get access like I do. Okay, right. You get to talk to some people. Yep. They love Isaiah Wynn.
Yep.
They wanted Isaiah Wynn over Brandon Shell, way over him. They loved his versatility. They loved his youth. They thought they still have upside, whereas Brandon Shell did not have upside. They felt that they got the max out of him last year, and that they felt that his body was so beaten up that it was going to be hard for him to even last throughout the offseason. And they need somebody that can practice. And Isaiah Wynn can practice, and Kendall Lamb can practice, and here's Brandon Shell retiring. So they were right about this, that the body wouldn't hold up.
Right. Absolutely. So, that's why I say always we get so obsessed with the names and what we know. Teams often know a little bit more. Sometimes they're wrong. Like, don't get me, they're not unforgiving, but sometimes they know a little bit more than the public knows, and that's what makes their decisions.
No Houston for you?
No. I actually love Houston. I went to college there, but I am not going to complain that I do not have to go to Houston. So our training camp coverage for TV for NFL Network, where we're on site as we have been for the Dolphins, some other teams throughout camp, it typically ends after the first preseason game. And so we stop traveling that much for actual practices and go more for just games. And so I won't be actually at a practice or a game this week. This is going to be I'm doing TV tonight. So tune in to NFL Network from 7 to 8. But I'll talk a little bit of Dolphins, talk a little bit of Carolina Panthers. But then after that, this should be a very light week for me. I'll make some calls, do some work, but then I'll catch up for next week and then kind of gear up for my preseason game. And then we'll get into regular season mode. So no Houston for me.
One more thing. Speaking of Houston, they did sign Kiki Kuti. And while he's very injury prone, he is incredibly electric. He's got some speed to him. Will they try to use him as a returner? Because I was thinking that I don't know much about him as here on this team right now. They're so deep at receiver. I don't think he has much of a shot. But if he would have any kind of a shot to be the last receiver, that he would something in the punt return game, because his quickness and shiftiness could be a real, impact. Now, again, I think it's just an insurance policy and he's training camp fodder. But what do you think out of that kid?
Yeah. I think that most likely he's a guy that's probably not going to make the team at this stage, but you never know. And I do think you're right. Your fifth and sixth receivers have to be special teams players. And so if you have that, it's something that helps you at the end. If they're thinking, hey, Braxton Berrios may win our starting slot job, maybe he's our number 3 receiver. Maybe we need somebody else just in case his offensive reps go up high. And maybe we don't want that somebody else to be Tyreek or Jalen Waddle. Maybe we'd rather have that guy be a Kiki. And so maybe that's your way on the roster. Not saying it's likely, but I'm saying these are some of the conversations that go into people's heads when they're deciding for a 6th receiver. Maybe they're deciding between
what's the other kid? That's Tanner Connor experiment. One's injured. The other one's in what is it? Not consistent.
Yep.
So that determines not working out. That's going to open up a spot there.
And the other thing that people don't realize, a lot of times you're not necessarily competing with a wide receiver. You're competing with a value of another spot. Like, for example, there may be, hey, we're deciding between keeping a 6th receiver, a 4th running back, and a 4th tight end. And we got one spot and we can only keep one. And it's like, well, this 6th receiver can help me a little bit more on special teams. We love Myles Gaskin, but he's not playing special teams for us. We love Tyler Kroft or Eric Sahlberg, whoever's the 3rd or 4th tight end, but they're not doing much for special teams. So maybe we keep an extra receiver, go three running backs and a fullback, and go 3 tight ends and go 6 receivers. And maybe that decision was because this guy gives us a little bit more on special teams. Neither guy is going to be playing much on offense, but that becomes a difference maker. So, yeah.
And then you can come out with a package of Mostert and H.A. in the backfield, and then a threesome of Hill, Waddle, and Kuti. And it's then
possible. Or Braxton or a Chosen, but yes, correct. Yes.
No, these guys are too slow to be in that group. No.
Chosen's not slow.
Chosen's fast.
Gotcha.
But Chosen is fast, but Chosen is like a one position fast type guy, whereas Waddle, Kuti, and Tyreek are fast in every way possible, not just top end.
Fair.
Side to side, cutting, slanting. Like, you don't want to deal with those kind of guys in the open field. You know what I'm saying? With Chosen, you know what he is. You're not getting me?
No, I got you. I got you.
Okay. All right. That's why that would be kind of fun, but I don't think Kuti will make it anyways. But I wanted to ask because the return game, and you thought the same thing I did with Berrios, that if the 3rd receiver plays so much that you also don't want to, wear him out. And he's already had a little bit of an injury here in the preseason.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. What do you got going on the NFL Network since you're slacking and not going to Houston?
Yeah. Well, I told you I got TV tonight, so I'll be on TV from 7 to 8 on NFL Network tonight. And then, you'll see me on probably sometime next week leading up into the preseason finale. And I'll be back at practice next week. And, we'll do the thing.
All right. Sounds good. Follow him on Twitter at Cameron Wolfe. Cam, as always, thank you, my brother. We'll catch up later in the week.
Absolutely. Sounds good, my man.
Thank you, sir. There you go. The great Cameron Wolfe. That is our KSDT CPA Sports. Miami Dolphins report.